The winter evening in Silverwood painted the empty streets in pale gold. In a forgotten parking lot, Peter Cole froze as a pair of amber eyes glimmered beneath a rusted pump. It was Parker, the German shepherd who once pulled him from fire and death, now frail, trembling, and scarred. That reunion was more than memory. It was the beginning of a hidden truth waiting to surface. What secret lies behind those loyal eyes? Follow Parker's moving story in this video. The town of Silverwood carried a silence that felt heavier in winter. Evening light spilled across empty streets, washing the cracked pavement in pale gold. Peter Cole adjusted the collar of his coat as he crossed into the forgotten lot on the south edge of town. He was supposed to be following up on a tip about stolen cars stripped for parts, but something in the air pressed him to slow down. The lot stretched wide, a graveyard of rusting pumps and broken glass. Wind whistled through the hollow canopy of an old fueling station. The smell of rubber and gasoline lingered faintly sharp against the cold air. Peter's boots ground against gravel as he stepped further in his eyes, scanning shadows for any sign of movement. That was when he saw them, amber eyes glowing faintly from beneath the frame of a toppled pump. The gaze struck him like a blow to the chest. The dog lay curled against the iron ribs drawn tight beneath a coat dulled by dirt and neglect. Patches of fur hung in clumps, and the body trembled as if even the air carried weight. Peter froze. His pulse stilled, then hammered hard. Those eyes were familiar. He took a careful step closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that barely carried across the wind. Parker. The name left his lips before he could stop it. The dog flinched ears flattening, a faint whine escaping its throat. Parker dragged himself slightly back under the pump, as though expecting hurt, but the eyes never left Peter's face. A surge of memory hit him. He remembered nights spent on patrol, Parker trotting steady at his side, sharp and watchful. He remembered a roar of fire, the world collapsing around him, and the feel of strong jaws dragging him through smoke. He had believed those days gone forever. Now the same dog trembled before him, reduced to bones and silence. Peter sank to one knee, the damp grit soaking through his trousers. He extended a hand slowly, palm open, his voice steady. "It's me, partner. I am here." Parker did not move. His body quivered, every muscle drawn tight. A faint scar cut across his flank, half hidden beneath the tangled fur. Peter's throat tightened. He knew that scar. It matched his own, the mark of shrapnel that had torn through both their sides 3 winters ago. For a long moment, the world narrowed to 2 figures, one man, one dog, caught between recognition and fear. The lot around them faded into stillness. Behind Peter, a voice cut through the quiet. That dog been lying there for months. He turned. An older woman stood several paces away, bundled in a lavender coat and red knit hat. A small wagon rattled behind her, filled with empty wrappers and jars. Her gaze was sharp despite the deep lines across her face. Peter rose, brushing dirt from his hands. "You feed him only scraps when I have them," she answered. "He stays put. Looks toward the hills like he's waiting for someone." Her words settled heavy in Peter's chest. He looked back at Parker. The dog had not shifted, though his eyes followed every breath Peter took. The woman's name tag caught the last of the light. Sarah. She stepped closer, studying Peter with a guarded look. "You know him, don't you?" Peter's voice caught as he nodded. "He was my partner once. His name is Parker." The name hung in the fading air. Parker blinked, a faint flicker passing through his gaze. His body eased just slightly, though he stayed beneath the frame of the pump. Sarah folded her arms. Then do right by him. That dog has carried something heavy. Peter crouched again, refusing to break the line of sight. I will, he murmured more to Parker than to her. We are going home. The dog did not step forward, but his breathing slowed. A thread of recognition glimmered in his eyes. It was fragile, but it was there. Peter stayed where he was, steady, patient, knowing trust would not return in a single moment. The evening deepened shadows, stretching long across the broken pavement. A chill settled in his bones, yet he remained unwilling to leave. Because Parker was not just any stray. He was the one who had once saved Peter's life. And as the last light of day slipped behind the hills of Silverwood, memory stirred. The fire, the blast, the moment everything changed. The memory pressed in before Peter could stop it. 3 winters earlier, Silverwood had not been quiet. The night sky burned orange, and the roar of fire drowned every sound. A warehouse on the edge of town had erupted after an explosion, flames clawing through metal beams. The ground shook, shards of glass rained, and smoke swallowed the streets. Peter had been inside chasing a lead on an arms deal gone wrong. The blast tore through walls and sent him crashing against concrete. His breath caught in his throat as pain lit through his side. Dust filled his lungs, and each cough ripped deeper into his chest. He tried to crawl, but debris pinned his leg. Through the haze, a shadow moved, swift, solid, relentless. Parker! The German shepherd appeared from the smoke eye's sharp body low. His coat shimmered in flashes of firelight as he pressed against Peter's side. Strong jaws gripped the edge of Peter's vest and pulled. Every tug sent a jolt through Peter's body, but the dog did not stop. He barked once, short and urgent, then pulled again, dragging him inch by inch away from the collapsing wall. Heat rolled over them, thick and merciless. Sparks fell like rain, searing holes in Parker's fur, but the dog pressed forward. He dug claws into broken tiles, muscles straining breath, harsh but steady. Peter remembered the sound of the roof giving way. He remembered Parker leaping across burning beams, dragging him clear of the wreckage, just as fire swallowed the spot where he had lain. Outside air cut sharp and cold against his face. Sirens wailed in the distance. Figures ran toward the blaze, but all Peter saw was Parker standing above him, chest-heaving ears, pinned eyes fixed on him. The dog's side bled where shrapnel had torn through a scar that would never fade. That night bound them together. From that moment on, Parker was not only a canine partner. He was family, the one Peter trusted with his life. For months afterward, they worked side by side. Patrols, searches, late-night calls. Parker was steady, fearless, and always alert to Peter's smallest movement. In the quiet hours when cases weighed heavy and silence felt unbearable, Parker lay beside him, head resting on his boots, a constant reminder that he was not alone. Then came the transfer. Peter had been told Parker was reassigned for specialized care after the blast. No questions allowed. No further details given. One day his partner was there. The next, he was gone. Peter carried the absence like a wound that never healed. Now staring across the lot at the trembling dog with amber eyes, the truth struck harder than the explosion ever had. Parker had survived, scarred and alone, carrying the same night inside him. Peter's hands curled into fists. He whispered, voice rough but sure, "I owe you everything." The evening wind swept across the lot, carrying the faint smell of pine from the hills beyond. Parker shifted his body still low, but less rigid ears tilting, as if the voice reached through the distance. The thread of recognition brightened, fragile, yet alive. Behind Peter, Sarah stood quietly, her wagon resting by her side. She studied the scene with a look that mixed weariness and care. Her silence carried weight, as if she had held back more than her first words. The last light drained from the sky shadows, folding deeper across Silverwood. Peter drew a breath, steadying himself. He knew the next step would not be simple. To bring Parker back, he needed answers. How long the dog had wandered, what had happened in those years, and why no one came looking. Sarah shifted her stance, folding her arms tighter against the cold. Her eyes lingered on Parker, then turned toward Peter, ready to speak. Sarah's voice broke the quiet. "I have seen him here for months," she said, her tone worn but steady. "Always the same spot. Always waiting." Her wagon creaked as she shifted her weight. The lavender coat she wore was faded at the seams, the purple dulled from years of use, but it stood out against the gray of the lot. The color made her seem both out of place and strangely rooted in this forgotten corner of Silverwood. Peter glanced back at Parker. The dog's ribs rose and fell in shallow rhythm. His eyes stayed fixed on Peter, but the weight of Sarah's words pressed heavy. "Months?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded. "Since late summer. He comes and goes, but never far. When the cold set in, I thought he would vanish. Yet every night I still hear him, a low sound like he is calling someone." She pointed toward the dark ridge beyond town. "Always facing that way?" Her gaze softened, though her voice carried steel. "People pass here, but they do not stop. Some toss stones to scare him off. Others avoid the lot altogether. But I could not turn away, so I gave what little I had. Scraps, half a sandwich, a cup of broth. He never let me close, but he ate enough to survive." Peter studied her, seeing the lines of hardship carved into her face. She had nothing, yet she had carried the weight of compassion that others ignored. He felt a stir of gratitude, sharp and humbling. "He is not a stray," Peter said. "His name is Parker. He once served with me." Sarah's eyes narrowed, searching him for truth. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "I thought so. The way he watches, the way he waits. That is not the look of a dog who belongs to no one. That is the look of a dog who remembers." Parker shifted ears, twitching at the sound of his name again. His body remained low, but his gaze held a trace of recognition, fragile, but undeniable. Sarah stepped closer to Peter, lowering her voice. "If he is yours, then you carry a duty. He has endured storms out here, cold nights, hunger. Something marked him deep. I can see it." Her gloved hand gestured faintly toward Parker. "He has been carrying more than a wound." The word sank into Peter's chest. Duty. The bond between handler and canine did not end with retirement, no matter what the papers claimed. He thought of the years Parker had stood beside him, the fire, the rescues, the silent trust. To see him reduced to this, starving, trembling, cut sharper than any scar. "I will not walk away," Peter murmured. "He is coming home." Sarah studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Her wagon wheels squeaked as she began to turn back toward the road. "Do right by him," she said, her voice drifting into the evening. "Not everyone does when it grows hard." Her figure faded into the dim light, leaving Peter alone with Parker once more. The lot grew colder, the smell of rust and damp earth, thick in the air. Peter crouched again, meeting Parker's eyes. "Easy, partner," he whispered. "We will get through this, one step at a time." The dog's chest rose, breath slow, his gaze steady, though his body remained tense. Then, as the shadows deepened, Peter saw it. A faint mark beneath Parker's tangled fur, a line that caught the last trace of fading light. A scar. Recognition surged through him, a memory pulling hard from years past. The scar glimmered faintly in the last edge of light. A thin line carved across Parker's flank, almost hidden beneath the matted coat. Peter leaned closer, steadying his breath. His hand hovered inches away, careful not to startle the dog. The sight pulled him back to that burning night in Silverwood. The blast, the roar, the desperate crawl through smoke. Shrapnel had sliced across both their bodies. Peter still carried the mark along his ribs, a pale reminder of survival. And now here it was again, written into Parker's side. Parker. He whispered the name, almost breaking in his throat. The dog shifted ears, twitching at the sound. He did not move away. His gaze held steady, as if weighing the man before him. For the first time, Peter felt the space between them narrow, not in distance, but in trust. He reached slowly, letting his fingers brush the filthy fur around the scar. Parker tensed, a low breath, shivering through him, yet he did not retreat. Peter's hand pressed gently against the rough coat, feeling the scar beneath. The connection struck deeper than words. Memories rushed back. Late-night drives with Parker stretched in the back seat, training fields where his bark once rang clear, the silent comfort of his presence after long shifts. Each moment returned, weaving into the scar like threads of a bond never broken. Peter swallowed hard. "It is really you." The truth settled heavy, but with it came something else. Relief, sharp and overwhelming. He had lost Parker, once forced to accept the lie of reassignment, yet here he was, scarred, trembling, alive. Parker's eyes softened. His breathing steadied, the rigid hold of fear easing by a fraction. The scar was more than proof. It was recognition shared between two survivors. Peter stayed close, speaking in a tone he had once used on night patrols. "You pulled me out of fire. You gave me a second chance. Now it is my turn." For a moment, silence held them. The rusted lot seemed less empty, the shadows less cruel. The scar bound them across years of absence, across pain neither could speak. But reality pressed in. Parker's ribs showed sharp beneath his coat. His steps were weak, his body thin from long months of hunger. The scar proved identity, yet it also told of suffering left unattended. Peter drew back, steadying his resolve. He knew he could not mend Parker alone. He needed help, someone who understood the wounds that ran deeper than scars. His thoughts turned toward Ana Rivera. The memory of her clear voice, her steady hands returned with force. Years ago, she had been the one he trusted with Parker's first treatments after missions. She had since built a small clinic in town, caring for strays and rescues with quiet dedication. Yes, Anna would know what to do. She would see what Parker carried in his body, perhaps even more than Peter could. The evening thickened around them, the last light gone from the sky. Parker shifted again, his eyes still on Peter, the scar marking him as more than a shadow of memory. Peter whispered, steady and sure. "We will get help. You will not face this alone." The words lingered in the dark, a promise both fragile and firm. Parker lowered his head, a flicker of trust passing through his eyes. Peter rose, knowing the next step was clear. Tomorrow he would take Parker to Anna. The scar had confirmed the truth. Now came the work of uncovering what else lay hidden beneath. Morning came with a dull gray sky hanging low over Silverwood. Frost clung to the edges of windows, and the streets glistened faintly from the night's thin snow. Peter drove slowly through town, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the back seat where Parker lay curled in a blanket. The dog's eyes flicked open and shut, alert but weary, every bump in the road, stirring a faint twitch in his ears. The small clinic sat at the end of Willow Street, tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a bakery that still smelled faintly of bread. The sign above the door read, "Rivera Veterinary Care," painted by hand, the letters soft but welcoming. Anna Rivera met them at the entrance, her coat buttoned tight against the cold. She had changed little in Peter's eyes, still the same sharp presence, the same calmness carried in her step. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, her expression brightening with recognition. "Peter," she said, voice steady but warm. "It has been years." He gave a small nod. "Too many. I need your help." Her gaze shifted to the blanket in the back seat. "That is him, isn't it?" Peter opened the door. Parker lifted his head, eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar space body, tensing, as if ready to pull away. Peter crouched beside him. "Easy. This is a friend." Anna knelt slowly, her hands open, careful not to startle. She spoke softly, words steady, like a rhythm Parker could follow. After a long pause, the dog allowed her to come close. Inside the clinic, the smell of antiseptic mixed with lavender soap. Shelves lined the walls filled with bandages, salves, and jars of herbs Anna used in her work. She guided Peter and Parker into a quiet room where light spilled through tall windows. "Let us see what he carries," she said gently. Parker stood unsteady on the table legs, trembling, but he did not resist. Anna worked with precision, her hands moving carefully over ribs, flank, paws. Her face, calm at first, began to tighten. "He is malnourished," she murmured, lifting Parker's lip to check the gums. "Severely underweight. His hydration levels are low. These scars. Yes, this one is old, but the others." She traced faint lines along his hind legs. "These are not from the streets." Peter frowned. "What do you mean?" Anna's eyes darkened. "Look at the pattern. Straight parallel, almost like wire. And here across the ribs, this is blunt force trauma, healing fractures. Someone struck him more than once." She lifted Parker's paw, revealing small marks across the skin. "And these pressure wounds, signs of restraint. He has been tied down, maybe caged for long stretches." The words sank heavy, colder than the frost outside. Peter's chest tightened as anger stirred. He had imagined Parker lost, left behind, surviving on scraps. But this was different. This was deliberate harm. Anna placed a hand gently on Parker's head, steadying him as his breath quickened. This was not chance, Peter. He was handled, controlled. This is a dog that has been through more than neglect. Peter's fists clenched at his sides. Someone did this to him. Anna met his eyes. Yes. And they erased the trail. If he is yours, if he once belonged to the Force, then there should be a record. But I have a feeling you will not find it where it should be. Peter looked down at Parker, who rested his head weakly against his arm. The dog's eyes still carried the same amber fire, dulled but unbroken. Peter felt the bond deepen his promise from last night, anchoring into something stronger. He exhaled slowly. Then I need to see the files. Anna stepped back, wiping her hands. Go look. I will keep him here for the night. He will be safe. Peter hesitated, then nodded. Trust was never easy, but with Anna, it was earned long ago. He placed a hand on Parker's shoulder. I will be back. Hold on. The dog blinked slowly, ears flicking once, as if to acknowledge the words. Peter turned toward the door, the resolve in his chest sharpening. If Parker's body carried scars of abuse, then the records would carry the proof of betrayal. The police station in Silverwood was quiet that night. Fluorescent lights hummed above the rows of desks, their glow casting pale shadows across walls lined with caseboards and faded maps. Peter walked through the empty hall, the echo of his boots carrying like a reminder of hours spent here in another life. When Parker padded close beside him, sharp and sure. He keyed into the archive room, a heavy door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The air inside smelled of dust and paper, with the faint metallic tang of old filing cabinets. Computer terminals sat in the corner, their screens waiting for a login. Peter slipped into the chair, fingers steady, as he entered his credentials. The system opened with a familiar interface, simple rows of search fields and filters. He typed in Parker's designation K9. Parker Handler, Peter Cole. The cursor blinked. A moment later, the screen displayed no results found. Peter frowned. He tried the serial number he remembered from Parker's vest. Nothing. He entered his own badge records, cross-referencing every mission from 3 years back. Still nothing. His chest tightened. The system wasn't blank. It was missing. Gaps appeared where case files should have been. Deployment logs, half empty, entire categories with skipped numbers. Parker's file hadn't been misplaced. It had been erased. Peter leaned back, eyes narrowing at the screen. His partner had served years on the line, saved lives, and bled for the department. Yet here in the records meant to preserve every detail he had been reduced to avoid. He opened the retirement logs, scrolling through the list of canines reassigned over the past decade. Each had a line of text, a serial, a note of transfer. He scanned carefully, finger tracing across the names until his breath caught. K9 22870. K9 22872. The number in between, Parker's number, was gone. Peter sat in silence, staring at the empty space. It was not an oversight. It was deliberate. Someone had cut Parker from the chain, erased his existence with surgical precision. He thought of the scars Anna had uncovered of Parker trembling at shadows in the lot. Abuse like that did not happen by chance. It required hands decisions, a system that looked the other way. Peter clenched his fists. The betrayal stretched deeper than one missing dog. This was a wound cut into the very trust he had sworn to uphold. He pushed back from the desk and rose. The archive room felt smaller now, the hum of the lights, louder, the walls pressing in. He stepped between the cabinets, eyes running along faded labels, searching for any forgotten corner. At the back, near a shelf stacked with old equipment, he found a box shoved half sideways. Dust coated the lid, but across the cardboard someone had scrawled a year, 2019. Peter pulled it down, coughing, as the dust rose around him. Inside were stray papers, transfer forms, faded photos, handwritten notes. Most were routine, the kind of clutter left behind when no one cared. Yet something caught his eye. A slip of paper torn along one edge, tucked between two outdated reports. The handwriting was jagged, the ink a dull red that had bled into the fibers. Only 2 words were written. Iron Paw Security. Peter stared at the name. The letters seemed to pulse with weight more than just a scribble. This was a lead, a shadow pointing toward something larger than missing files. He folded the paper and slid it into his pocket. The pieces were aligning slow, but certain. Parker had not simply been abandoned. He had been taken into a system that hid itself in erased lines and forgotten boxes. As Peter left the archive room, the station hallways seemed colder, the silence heavier. He knew he had stepped onto a path that would not end with one dog. Iron Paw was waiting, and whatever truth it carried would not stay buried for long. Peter drove home with the slip of paper pressed tight in his pocket, the words Iron Paw Security echoing in his mind. The street lamps of Silverwood flickered as he passed, their glow thin against the night. Every turn of the wheel carried a weight heavier than before, as though the town itself had shifted around him. At his kitchen table, he laid the paper flat beneath the lamp. The ink had bled into the fibers, but the letters were clear, uneven, and written in haste. Iron Paw Security. It sounded less like a business and more like a warning. He powered up his laptop and searched the name. Results were scarce. A few outdated listings, a single defunct website with no working links, and a line in a regional business registry that marked the company as inactive. No address, no contact, only silence. Peter leaned back, exhaling slow. Companies did not simply vanish. Someone had buried the trail. The missing file numbers, Parker's erased record, now this. Each piece pointed to something intentional. He thought of Parker lying at Anna's clinic, too thin-scarred, flinching at every sound. A decorated canine did not end up broken in a forgotten lot by accident. The dog had been handled, controlled, hurt. And Iron Paw's name sat like a brand at the center of it. Peter sifted through the box again, scanning the faded forms for any other clue. Most were routine. Budget requests, transfer approvals, archived case notes. Then his eyes caught a second slip, half torn. A contact list, or what was left of one. Beside faded names and numbers, one line had been underlined twice in red logistics, IP. The initials matched. The realization settled cold. This was not one dog's story. This was a system, a trade hidden beneath uniforms and paperwork, built on the silence of animals who could not speak for themselves. Peter sat back, his jaw tight. He had seen corruption before, cases that slipped away under pressure, evidence lost to bureaucracy. But this cut deeper. These were partners' dogs who gave loyalty without question, erased as if they had never mattered. The name burned in his thoughts long after he closed the files. He knew what came next. He would need to return to Anna, to Parker, and share what he had found. Yet part of him hesitated. Speaking it aloud would make it real, a path that could not be undone. Peter turned off the lamp and stood by the window. The town outside lay in quiet shadow rooftops, silvered by moonlight. Somewhere beyond the streets, Parker breathed in restless sleep, scars hidden, but not forgotten. The thought strengthened Peter's resolve. The trail of Iron Paw would not stay hidden. He slipped the slip of paper back into his pocket, folding it carefully. It was small, almost weightless, yet it carried the weight of betrayal, of questions unanswered, of justice waiting. As he stepped away from the table, a faint sound drifted in through the night. A car horn in the distance, sharp and brief. The tone was ordinary, yet something about it carried unease. Peter paused, unsettled, though he could not yet name why. Morning light spread weakly across Silverwood, the kind that turned frost into mist along the rooftops. Peter parked in front of Anna's clinic and stepped inside, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the faint aroma of coffee. Parker lay curled near a heater, head resting on his paws. His body looked fragile, yet his eyes opened the moment Peter entered. They followed him with a quiet recognition that made Peter's chest tighten. Anna glanced up from her desk. "He ate a little," she said softly. "Drank more water too, but he startles easily. Loud noises unsettle him." Peter crouched beside Parker, running a hand along his shoulder. The dog leaned faintly into the touch, a small but clear sign of trust returning. "Good boy," Peter murmured. They stayed like that for a while, until the sound came. A sharp, dual-pitched car horn outside on the street. Ordinary in any other moment. But for Parker, it was a trigger. The dog bolted upright, eyes wide, body stiff. He scrambled under the table, pressing himself against the wall, his chest heaving as if bracing for impact. A low growl vibrated in his throat, not directed at anyone, but at a memory. Peter froze. "Parker," he said calmly, crouching lower. "It is all right." Anna's face tightened as she watched. "That is not normal fear," she whispered. "That is conditioned response." He has heard that horn before. Peter eased closer, keeping his tone steady. "Partner, it is gone. You are safe." His words carried patience, the same rhythm he had once used in the field. It took long minutes, but Parker's breathing began to slow. His eyes flicked toward Peter, catching his steady gaze. The trembling lessened, though he did not leave the corner. Anna knelt beside them. "I have seen this in trauma cases. Dogs who have been restrained, shocked, even starved. A sound, a smell, anything tied to the pain. When they hear it again, the body reacts before the mind can catch up." Peter felt the weight of her words. Parker had not just wandered lost. He had lived through something structured, repeated, designed to break him. He thought of the slip of paper with iron paw security scrawled across it. The erased records. The scars Anna had traced. Each clue now tangled with this horn, this sound that dragged Parker back into fear. He placed a steady hand on the dog's side, feeling the tense muscles beneath the fur. "Whatever they did, it ends here," Peter whispered. Parker's ears twitched at his voice. The growl faded to silence, replaced by slow, heavy breaths. He stayed in the corner, but his eyes softened, finding Peter again through the fog of memory. Anna rose quietly. "You need to be careful. If that horn belongs to a vehicle nearby, someone might be watching. And if they are tied to where he came from." Her words trailed off, but the warning was clear. Peter nodded. The unease from last night returned sharper now. A sound was not just sound, it was a trace, a reminder, maybe even a signal. He looked once more at Parker, who had begun to settle his head, lowering back to the floor. The dog was scarred, shaken, yet unbroken. Each reaction carried a message. Each scar carried a story. And Peter was determined to uncover them all. Outside, the streets of Silverwood seemed quiet. Yet somewhere beyond the glass engines idled and shadows moved. The afternoon in Silverwood hung gray and heavy, the kind of sky that blurred hills into haze. Peter left Anna's clinic with Parker resting in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket. The dog's eyes followed every shift of the road, ears twitching at each sound. Peter kept one hand steady on the wheel, the other near the blanket, as if his presence alone could anchor Parker back to calm. As he turned onto Whitlow Avenue, his eyes caught something in the mirror. A dark-colored SUV, older model, its paint dulled by dust. It kept its distance, yet every time Peter slowed, the vehicle slowed too. When he turned right, it followed. His pulse quickened. He took another street, then circled the block. The SUV lingered, never too close, never too far. The tinted windows gave no hint of who sat behind the wheel. Peter whispered under his breath, "So this is not coincidence." Parker shifted, lifting his head. His ears pinned back, body tense, as if he too sensed the presence trailing them. When the SUV's horn gave a short, sharp blare as another car passed, Parker pressed against the seat, trembling. His reaction confirmed the link. This was not just a random driver. This was part of his past. Peter drove toward the edge of town, past shuttered stores and the empty lot where he had first found Parker. The SUV kept pace, shadowing each turn. He pulled onto a side road near the rail yard and parked by a diner. Through the glass window, he watched the SUV roll past, slowly, engine low, before turning down another street. He stayed seated, breathing, steady, eyes fixed on the fading taillights. His chest tightened with the awareness of what had just begun. He was no longer searching alone. He was being tracked. Inside the diner, the air smelled of coffee and fried food. Peter sat at the counter, Parker resting at his feet beneath the table. The waitress poured him a cup without asking, her eyes flicking once at the German shepherd, but saying nothing. Peter's phone buzzed. A message from Anna. "How is he?" He typed back with quick fingers. "Resting." "But we are not alone." He hesitated, then added, "Dark SUV, sand-colored, late-model tinted windows. Been following us since Whitlow." Anna's reply came swift. "Careful. Whoever it is, they are watching him, not you." Peter looked down at Parker. The dog's eyes stared at the door, his body coiled tight, every sense alive. He had the look of someone waiting for danger, as though he had lived this scene before. Peter's thoughts returned to the name scrawled on that slip of paper. Iron Paw Security. The erased files, the scars, the horn. Piece by piece, the outline of a shadow organization took form. And now its gaze had turned back on him. The waitress set down his plate. Peter barely touched it. His mind ran ahead, tracing possibilities. If the SUV was watching Parker, then somewhere there had to be a place, a hub, where they had kept him trained, broken him. He needed to find it before they circled closer. He sipped his coffee, eyes drifting to the window where the SUV had vanished. The feeling did not fade. He was being hunted, and the hunt had only begun. Peter reached for the slip of paper in his pocket, pressing it flat against his palm. The trail was leading him outward, away from the safe streets of town, toward something hidden at the edges. The road out of Silverwood narrowed into cracked asphalt, lined with bare trees. A damp wind pushed against Peter's coat as he parked on the edge of an industrial zone long forgotten. Warehouses stood in rows, their windows' shattered metal siding rusted into streaks of orange and black. He walked carefully, Parker at his side on a short lead. The dog's body stiffened the moment they passed the chain-link gate. His ears flicked forward, nose twitching, as if memory had already filled the air. Warehouse 16 loomed ahead, half its roof caved in. The side door hung on broken hinges, creaking faintly in the breeze. Peter pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit first, stale rust mold, and the sharp bite of something chemical. The air was colder here, heavy with silence. His flashlight cut through dust beams, catching on twisted metal and shattered glass. Then the light landed on the cages. Rows of them stretched along the concrete floor. Steel bars bent and broken, some collapsed into heaps, others still bolted to the ground. Heavy chains dangled from the walls, frayed ropes trailing across the floor. Empty bowls lay scattered, their rims crusted with dry flakes of food. Parker froze. A low whine caught in his throat. His body pressed close to Peter's leg tail, tucked eyes locked on the cages. It was recognition, not curiosity. Peter swallowed hard and moved deeper in. The place was not a warehouse anymore. It had been a holding site. A desk sat against the far wall, buried under dust, and a plastic tarp. Peter pulled the cover away, coughing as a cloud of dirt rose. Beneath it lay a stack of folders, yellowed pages, and a cracked monitor connected to a dead computer tower. He lifted one of the folders. Inside were forms marked with codes instead of names. Asset type, handler ID, destination. Each line ended with a series of numbers. Beside them, faint notes scrawled in red ink: approved, shipped, disposed. His grip tightened on the paper. These were not case files. They were shipment logs. As he sifted through the pile, a photo slipped free and landed face down on the desk. He turned it over and froze. The picture showed Parker. Stronger, heavier than he looked now, but unmistakably Parker. His stance was rigid body, squared ears alert. And beside him stood a man in a gray jacket, gloves pulled tight, face turned away from the camera. Peter felt the air leave his chest. This was no accident. Someone had documented Parker as part of their system, photographed him like an item ready for transfer. He studied the man in the photo. The posture was familiar, the build tall and lean. It matched the shadow he had seen step from the SUV. At the bottom of the photo, a note had been written in red: assignment incomplete. Peter set the photo down slowly, his thoughts racing. Parker had not just been caught in this network. He had been assigned, conditioned, prepared for something unfinished. And the man in gray was still out there. Behind the desk, a small cabinet sat half open. Inside was a black aluminum hard drive, dented and scratched, the label worn, but still visible Sierra. Peter lifted it carefully, dust coating his hands. Whatever was inside might explain the erased records, the shipments, the conditioning. He slid the drive into his bag, the weight of it pressing against his side. As he turned to leave, Parker let out a low sound, ears pricked toward the open door. The wind outside had stilled, yet the silence felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Peter tightened his grip on the lead, his voice steady. "We have what we need. Now let us get it unlocked." Back at his small house on Whitlow Street, Peter set the black hard drive on his dining table. The aluminum casing was scarred, corners dented, as if it had been handled roughly or dropped more than once. Across the top, the faint word Sierra had been etched in block letters, the edges worn smooth by time. Parker lay curled near the radiator, eyes half shut, but tracking every sound. The dog had not settled since they left the warehouse. Each creak in the walls or groan of the floor drew a twitch of his ears, a reminder of memories too close to the surface. Peter powered up his laptop, connected the drive, and waited. For a long moment, the screen remained blank. Then folders began to appear, strings of numbers and letters with no clear pattern. He opened the first. Inside was a profile, a photograph of a sable German shepherd, mouth open mid-bark. Below it, text scrolled across the page. Serial number, handler, history, age, weight. At the bottom, one word stood out: transferred. Peter clicked through the next folder. Another dog. Then another. Dozens of them. Each one carried a record of service: military, police, border patrol. Each one ended with a transfer date followed by a cryptic note: contractor approved, private client confirmed, asset shipped. His breath grew shallow as he scrolled further. At least 30 names filled the screen, a silent ledger of lives turned into transactions. Then he found Parker's. The file read ID K9 22871. Handler Cole Peter. Service 2015-2019. Status retired. Transfer date September 17, 2020. Client Gray Line Logistics. Condition reactive in confined spaces. Displays extreme loyalty to prior handler. Recommendation reconditioning required. Peter's hand tightened on the mouse. The word burned into him. Reconditioning. He clicked the attached note. It described sedation protocols, training regimens, control measures meant to strip away instinct and replace it with obedience. Words like shock tolerance, restraint, acclimation, isolation, reinforcement filled the screen, each one colder than the last. It was an instruction manual for breaking loyalty. Peter leaned back, a wave of nausea rising. This was more than neglect, more than cruelty. This was systemic. Dogs like Parker had been taken, conditioned, and sold as if they were tools to be repurposed. Parker shifted by the radiator, lifting his head, as if sensing the weight in the air. His amber eyes caught the glow of the screen, reflecting a faint light. Peter thought of the scars along his ribs, the way he had bolted at the horn, the tremor in his muscles. Each reaction was no accident. It had been designed. He pressed his palms against the table, forcing the bile back down. The drive held more: contracts signed under false names, invoices that tallied lives in dollars, shipping manifests that disguised dogs as assets. The total value exceeded $25,000, but no number could measure what had been stolen. Peter closed the folders, his heart pounding. The truth lay bare, but it was not enough to stop it. This was a shadow network bigger than one warehouse or one erased file. He looked at Parker, who lowered his head back onto the blanket, eyes still watching. "They tried to erase you," Peter said softly. "But you are still here." The drive clicked softly in the machine, as if reminding him there was more to uncover. He knew he could not do this alone. There was someone else who had touched this network, someone who might hold another piece of the puzzle. Anna. Peter carried the hard drive to Anna's clinic the next morning. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, the air damp with the promise of rain. Inside, the quiet hum of the heater filled the room where Parker rested. Anna looked up from her desk when Peter entered, noting the tension on his face before he even spoke. "I found something," he said, setting the drive on the counter. "This isn't just about Parker. It's bigger." Anna adjusted her glasses and leaned in as Peter pulled up the files. He showed her the rows of profiles, the transfer logs, the invoices. Her hand covered her mouth as the truth spread across the screen. "They cataloged them," she whispered. "Every dog, every handler link, and then sold them like inventory." Peter nodded grimly. "And they didn't just sell them, they broke them. Reconditioning protocols, shock tolerance, isolation drills. They were training loyalty out of them." Anna's eyes hardened. "I've seen something like this." Peter turned toward her, his voice low but urgent. "When—" She folded her arms across her chest, staring at the floor for a long moment before answering. 3 years ago. I got a call. Someone said they were from a federal relocation initiative for K9s. They asked me to come out to a warehouse on the outskirts not far from Mill Creek. Said they needed a vet to sedate several dogs before transport. Peter's chest tightened. How many? At least a dozen, Anna said quietly. They were lined in cages, all muzzled, all marked with tattoos in their ears. Not strays. They had scars, trained posture. I knew they were service dogs, but I told myself maybe it was legitimate. Maybe relocation was real. Her voice faltered, but she forced herself to continue. When I finished, a man signed my invoice. He wore a plain jacket, no badge, no nameplate. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just said, "We'll take it from here." And then he sent me away. Peter stared at her, the fragments aligning in his mind. The erased files, the SUV, the photo of Parker beside the man in gray, and now Anna's warehouse memory. It wasn't scattered coincidence. It was organized. "Iron Paw," he muttered. Anna blinked. "What?" He pulled the folded slip of paper from his pocket, setting it on the desk. The red ink had bled into the fibers, but the name was still visible. Iron Paw Security. That's who signed Parker out of the records, Peter said. That's who's behind the conditioning. And if you saw 12 dogs that day, then Parker wasn't alone. This is a network. They've been moving dogs for years, hiding them behind shell companies and fake contracts. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the heater. Parker shifted on his blanket ears, twitching, his body still lean but stronger than when Peter had first found him. Anna lowered herself into a chair, her voice soft. If this is true, it's not just Silverwood. It's bigger. Dogs from different units, different states, disappearing into the same shadow. Peter pressed his palms flat against the desk. Then we follow the shadow. Every scar on him is a map. Every erased line is a trail. They think no one is watching, but they're wrong. Anna met his eyes, steady now. Then you need to be ready. Because if Iron Paw has noticed you looking, they won't sit still. Peter glanced at Parker. The dog's amber eyes reflected the room's dim light, carrying both exhaustion and fire. He thought of the horn, the SUV, the scars. The signs weren't random. They were remnants of something Parker had survived, but not escaped. A sudden idea tightened in Peter's mind. If conditioning had left its mark, then somewhere, somehow, Parker would show it again. And when it surfaced, it might point directly back to the methods Iron Paw used. The clinic had grown quiet again, the heater humming against the winter chill. Parker lay stretched on his blanket, eyes half closed, ears twitching at every sound beyond the walls. Peter sat nearby with his laptop open, scrolling through the hard drive files again. The word reconditioning repeated in his mind like a curse. Anna set a mug of tea beside him. "You've been staring at that screen for an hour," she said gently. Peter rubbed his forehead. "I'm trying to understand how they did it, what they used. Dogs don't just flinch at random. Something taught him to fear that horn." Anna nodded slowly. Trauma leaves patterns. The right trigger can bring it all back. As if on cue, a car outside honked, 2 sharp, clipped notes. The sound was ordinary, yet it struck the room like a blade. Parker snapped upright. His muscles stiffened, ears flattened, eyes wild. A growl tore from his chest as he lunged toward the window claws scraping the floor. His body slammed against the frame, teeth bared, breath ragged. "Parker." Peter shouted, moving fast. He caught the dog by the harness, holding tight, though the force nearly pulled him off balance. Parker thrashed, snapping at air eyes, not seeing the room, but something else, something buried deep. Anna's face paled. "This isn't fear," she whispered. This is a command response. Peter gritted his teeth muscles, straining as Parker fought against him. It's conditioning, he said through clenched jaw. They used this sound in training, over and over until it stuck. Anna moved quickly, grabbing a thick towel and draping it over Parker's shoulders, creating a barrier. The pressure seemed to ground him. Slowly, the growl faded into heavy panting, his body shaking as he sank back down. Peter knelt beside him, voice steady. Easy, partner. You're here. You're safe. Parker's eyes blinked recognition, slowly replacing the wild haze. His body trembled, but he pressed against Peter's side, seeking the steady anchor of his voice. Anna crouched beside them, her expression grim. They rewired him, tied a sound to aggression, maybe obedience. But the training fractured. Instead of control, it left panic. Peter stroked Parker's head, anger burning beneath his calm tone. That's why they marked his file assignment incomplete. They tried to break him, but he wouldn't bend. The realization chilled him more than the winter air. Iron Paw had used methods meant to erase loyalty to turn Parker into something else. Yet Parker had resisted, and the resistance left scars deeper than flesh. Anna's voice was quiet. If Parker carries this, then the others do too. Dogs still trapped in that system. Still waiting for the right horn, the right trigger. Peter's jaw tightened. Then we find the people running it, and we shut it down. He looked down at Parker, who rested now with his head heavy against Peter's knee. The dog's breaths came slower, steadier, but the memory of his violent reaction lingered in the room like smoke. Anna stood. You can't chase this alone. Whoever trained him will notice when their experiment fails. They'll come looking. Peter met her eyes, resolve hardening. Let them. The name on the slip of paper echoed in his thoughts. Iron Paw Security. The SUV shadowing his car. The man in the gray jacket. All of it led to the same conclusion: the network knew Parker was alive, and they wouldn't leave unfinished work behind. He reached for his coat. It's time to draw them out. The plan took shape in less than 2 days. Peter crafted a message under a false name and sent it through one of the encrypted boards he had discovered on the Sierra Drive. He posed as a potential client interested in acquiring a trained K-9 for private security. His words were blunt, designed to sound detached, like someone who saw a dog as nothing more than an asset. The reply came quickly. A man calling himself Lyall offered to meet outside Silverwood, deep in the forest near an old ranger trail. The tone of the message was simple. No questions asked. Bring cash, arrive alone. Peter left Parker with Anna for the evening, not willing to risk exposing him. He dressed in plain clothes, a jacket without his badge, a cap pulled low. The weight of a recording device pressed against his belt. Dusk bled into night as he drove out of town, the headlights cutting a narrow path through the trees. He parked half a mile away and walked the rest boots crunching over frost-covered leaves. The forest stretched wide branches black against the dim sky. At the meeting point, the trail opened into a clearing. A broken fire pit lay in the center, ringed by logs half buried in moss. The air was still, but Peter felt the weight of eyes long before he saw anyone. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, wiry, mid-40s. His jacket was tactical, his face hidden beneath a cap and scarf. You're early, the man said, voice sharp. I came alone, Peter replied, steady. You have the dog? Lyall's eyes flicked across the clearing. Back there, but we confirm first. His tone carried suspicion, the kind honed from years of deception. Peter shifted his stance, feigning indifference. Fine. Show me. But Lyle didn't move. Instead, his shoulders stiffened. "Something's off," he muttered. The crack of a twig behind Peter confirmed it. He turned just as another man emerged from the trees, stockier, carrying the stance of someone ready for violence. A third figure appeared to the left, boxing him in. Peter's pulse spiked. His hand twitched toward the panic button on his recorder, but a heavy boot landed on his wrist, forcing him to his knees. Lyle stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the clearing. "You smell like a cop," he said coldly. "And we deal with cops one way." The stocky man pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching a faint glint of moonlight. Peter's chest heaved, his breath sharp in the cold air. He had expected risk, but this was worse. This was execution. "Dig a hole," Lyle ordered. "Make it quick." The third man moved to obey, dragging a spade from the brush. Dirt thudded softly as he began to dig. The forest seemed to close in the silence, pressing heavy around them. Peter clenched his jaw, searching for an opening. He could fight one, maybe two, but not three armed men in the middle of the woods. His muscles coiled, ready for one desperate move, but his mind screamed at the futility. Lyle crouched close, his eyes hard. "You should have stayed in town, detective. Some things aren't meant to be uncovered." The knife hovered, glinting above the frost. Peter forced himself to meet the man's gaze, his chest tight with the weight of what might be his last breath. And then from the shadows of the forest came a sound, low, fierce, primal. A growl that shook the clearing. The growl rolled through the clearing like thunder trapped in a cage. All three men froze. The knife hung in midair. Even Lyle's sharp expression faltered as his head snapped toward the tree line. From the darkness, Parker burst forward. His body was lean, but powerful fur, bristling eyes blazing with fury. He moved like a shadow made of muscle and teeth, launching himself into the fray with the precision of a soldier returning to the field. The stocky man with the knife barely raised his arm before Parker hit him full force. The impact knocked the blade from his grip, clattering across the frost. Parker's jaws clamped down on his forearm, dragging him to the ground. In a tangle of curses and blood, Peter surged to his feet, adrenaline flooding his veins. He grabbed the fallen knife, spinning toward the second attacker. The man swung a heavy branch, catching Peter across the shoulder, but Peter shoved forward, slashing the blade close enough to drive him back. Lyle shouted, "Get the dog off him!" But Parker didn't relent. His growl deepened, vibrating through the clearing as his teeth held firm. The man digging with the spade dropped it and lunged, trying to pry Parker away. Peter intercepted, tackling him hard. They rolled across the cold earth, fists colliding, breath-ragged. For a moment, chaos consumed the clearing. Shouts, snarls, the thud of fists against dirt. The frost turned slick with sweat and blood. Peter staggered to his knees, knife still clutched tight. He caught sight of Parker, who finally released his first target only to leap again. This time he slammed into Lyle, sending the wiry man sprawling. The dog's weight pinned him, his teeth flashing inches from the man's throat. Parker Peters' voice cut through the din, commanding but steady. "Hold!" The shepherd froze, chest-heaving breath steaming in the night air. His jaws hovered, his eyes never leaving Lyle's terrified face. Peter stepped closer. Knife raised, his voice low but iron hard. "You move, and he finishes it." The forest fell still. The three men lay defeated, one clutching a bleeding arm, another groaning on the ground, and Lyle trembling beneath Parker's weight. Peter knelt beside his partner, pressing a hand to the dog's side. Parker's muscles trembled, not from fear, but from the raw power of release. His amber eyes found Peter's recognition burning through the haze of battle. "You're still my partner," Peter whispered, his throat tight. "You always were." Parker's ears flicked, and for the first time since their reunion, his tail gave a single sharp thump against the ground. Peter stood knife-steady eyes on Lyle. "Talk." "Who sent you?" Lyle spat blood, his voice shaking. "You think you can stop this? Iron Paw runs deeper than you know. Dogs that don't obey get erased. That's what we do." Peter's stomach twisted, but he pressed harder. "Then I'll make sure the world hears it from your own mouth." He reached down and yanked the recorder from his belt. The red light blinked steady. Every word had been captured. The sound of sirens in the distance began to pierce the silence, growing closer with each second. Back up. Anna must have called it in when Peter didn't return. Peter glanced at Parker, who stood tall, chest heaving, but posture proud. In that moment, the shepherd wasn't a broken experiment. He was a warrior scarred, but unbroken, who had chosen to rise again. The men would be taken, the evidence secured. But Peter knew this was only the beginning. Iron Paw's roots were still hidden in the dark. By the time dawn broke, the three men were in custody, their faces pale beneath the flashing lights of patrol cars. Peter stood at the edge of the clearing, Parker beside him, watching as officers hauled the suspects away. Lyle's words still rang in his ears. "Dogs that don't obey get erased." Back at the precinct, Peter spread the evidence across his desk. The recorder lay in the center, its red light blinking as the battery drained. Every word from the ambush had been captured, a confession too sharp to dismiss. Beside it lay the Sierra Drive. Peter connected it once more, scrolling through the files with a cold determination. This time he moved slower, cataloging each folder. He saved copies to secure servers, knowing deletion could come at any time if Iron Paw still had reach inside law enforcement. The files grew darker with every click. Photographs of cages stacked in dim warehouses. Dogs' muzzled, chained eyes hollow. Handlers in plain clothes with no insignia, their faces half hidden in shadow. In one image, Parker stood rigid beside the man in the gray jacket, his body squared, as if forced into obedience, but his eyes betrayed him. Defiance beneath the surface. Peter printed the photos, laying them in rows across the desk. The weight of them filled the room. These were not just records. They were testimonies from those who could not speak. The shipping manifests confirmed Lyle's claim. Each dog carried a line of fate reassigned, transferred, disposed. The last word struck Peter hardest. Disposed. A cold term to hide what it meant. Execution of the unwanted. Anna arrived mid-morning, her expression tight as she stepped into the office. Parker lifted his head from the corner tail, flicking once, before he settled again. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. Peter gestured to the table. "Look at this. They sold them off like spare parts, and the ones they couldn't break." He tapped a page marked with a red stamp. They were erased. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she picked up a photo. "This is more than enough," she whispered. "With this, you could force the department to act. Even higher." Peter shook his head. "Not just the department. The state, maybe further. Iron Paw isn't local. They're spread wide, hidden under different names. But these documents tie them together." He showed her the recording, Lyle's voice spilling from the speaker. "Dogs that don't obey get erased. That's what we do." The words cut through the office like a blade. Anna swallowed hard. "No one can ignore this." Peter gathered the files, photos, and recordings into a thick binder. Each piece was proof, but together they formed something larger. A case that could not be buried. He glanced at Parker, who had risen to his feet, watching them with steady eyes. The dog's body still carried scars, but his presence filled the room with quiet strength. Peter placed a hand on the binder, his voice low. "We take this to court. We show the world what they tried to hide." Anna nodded, resolve matching his own. "And we make sure no other canine ends up like Parker." Peter exhaled the decision firm. The courtroom would be no safer than the forest, but it was the battleground Iron Paw could not control. The sun rose higher outside its light, cutting through the blinds in sharp bars. For the first time since finding Parker, Peter felt not just anger, but momentum. Justice had a shape now, black and white, captured in files and voices ready to be unleashed. The courthouse in Silverwood had never seen a crowd so large. By the time Peter arrived with Anna and Parker, the steps were filled with reporters, camera crews, and townspeople carrying homemade signs. "Justice for Canines." One banner read in bold letters. Another, held high by a child, said simply, "Parker is proof." Parker walked close to Peter's side, head held low, but posture steady. His scars were still visible through his coat, but his presence drew the eyes of everyone on the steps. Whispers rippled through the crowd. An injured warrior returned to face the men who had tried to erase him. Inside the chamber overflowed. The seats brimmed with officials, advocates, and officers from neighboring counties. The air buzzed with tension, heavy with expectation. At the center, under the state seal, sat the judge, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Peter took his place at the front, binder in hand. His voice, though measured, carried across the room. 3 months ago, I found my retired partner starving in an abandoned lot. What I discovered after was not just neglect, but betrayal woven into a network that treated service dogs as disposable. He pressed the remote, and the screen behind him lit up. Photos from the Sierra Drive appeared. Rows of cages, scars across muzzled dogs, invoices marked with codes. Gasps rippled through the chamber. "These animals saved lives," Peter continued, "and when they could no longer serve, they were sold, beaten, or silenced. Iron Paw Security and its partners erased records, scrubbed files, and buried the truth. But they left traces. And Parker survived to show us." The recording from the forest played next. Lyle's voice echoed through the speakers. "Dogs that don't obey get erased. That's what we do." The words landed like a hammer. Murmurs filled the chamber. The judge's gavel struck once, restoring order. Prosecutors stepped forward with names pulled from the files. Contract coordinators, transport officers, veterinarians who signed false papers. Charges spilled out: trafficking, falsifying records, cruelty, racketeering. One by one, the defendants sat in silence, their faces pale beneath the weight of the evidence. Peter's gaze shifted briefly to Parker, who sat beside him, ears alert, eyes fixed on the room. The shepherd looked both weary and proud, his very presence testimony stronger than words. Outside, the crowd roared as updates streamed across live broadcasts. Silverwood, a quiet town, had become the center of a storm that stretched beyond state lines. Across the country, people watched, shared, and called for reform. The story of Parker, and the dogs like him, was no longer hidden. The judge leaned forward. "This court acknowledges the weight of the evidence. What has been revealed here is not a single act of cruelty, but a deliberate system of exploitation. The trial will proceed with full charges, and this record will remain open to the public." Applause broke in the chamber, despite the gavel's strike. For once, formality bent to truth. Peter closed the binder, exhaling a long breath. The battle was far from finished, but the walls of silence had cracked. As they stepped outside, the crowd erupted. Camera flashes lit the air, voices chanting Parker's name. Signs waved high. Loyalty deserves justice, heroes don't get erased. Parker stood at Peter's side, tail lifting slightly, ears forward, as if he understood the moment. The shepherd who had been left to die now stood as the face of a movement. The ceremony was held 3 weeks after the trial began. By then, Silverwood had become a symbol. Reporters filled the town square, their cameras set on the stage erected before the courthouse steps. Banners stretched across lampposts. Honor the forgotten. Justice for canines. Peter stood in uniform at the center, Parker at his side. The dog's coat had grown thicker under Anna's care, though his scars still marked him. Far from a blemish, they shone like medals of their own, etched proof of survival. The crowd numbered in the thousands. Families held signs, children waved hand-drawn posters of Parker with words like hero and thank you. Officers from across the state filled the front rows, many with their own service dogs at their feet. The governor stepped to the podium, his voice carrying clear across the square. We gather here not only to bring justice to the guilty, but to honor those who gave loyalty when loyalty was betrayed. Today we recognize one such hero, Canine Parker. The square erupted in cheers. Parker's ears pricked his body, shifting slightly, as if puzzled by the sound. But Peter placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The governor continued. 3 years ago, Parker saved his handler's life in a firestorm that would have claimed them both. Since then, he endured cruelty no warrior should face, yet he survived. And because he survived, he exposed a system built on silence. His scars speak louder than the lies that tried to erase him. An officer stepped forward, carrying a small black vest, embroidered with a golden emblem. The Medal of Valor gleamed at its center, fixed onto the vest with care. The governor bent low, fastening the vest onto Parker's chest. The shepherd stood tall, ears forward, his amber eyes steady, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Parker, the governor, said solemnly, on behalf of this state, we honor your courage, your loyalty, and your survival. You will never be forgotten. The crowd rose in thunderous applause. Some shouted his name. Others simply stood with tears in their eyes. Peter swallowed, hard pride and grief colliding inside him. He looked down at Parker. The dog turned his head, nudging Peter's hand with his nose. For all the noise around them, the gesture was simple, quiet, and more profound than any speech. Cameras flashed, capturing the shepherd standing proud in his new vest, the Medal of Valor gleaming in the sunlight. Peter stepped to the microphone. His voice trembled once, then steadied. 3 months ago, I found Parker starving in a parking lot. I thought I was saving him. But the truth is, he saved me again. He reminded me that loyalty is not measured in records or contracts, but in bonds that cannot be broken. The crowd hushed, leaning in. He was meant to be erased. Instead, he became the voice for every canine who gave everything and was left with nothing. This medal does not close the fight. It begins it. Parker is not just my partner. He is our reminder. We honor them with action, not just applause. The cheers returned louder, echoing through the square. Parker stood unshaken, the sun catching his scarred flank, making it shine like burnished steel. He was not the broken dog Peter had found. He was a symbol, a survivor, an anchor for justice. Winter settled deeper into Silverwood, but the house on Whitlow Street glowed with warmth. Through the windows, firelight flickered across the living room walls, throwing shadows that swayed gently over shelves and framed photos. The scent of pine wood, mixed with roasted chicken, drifting into every corner. Parker lay stretched on the rug near the hearth, his chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. The faint line of his scar glistened in the glow, no longer a mark of weakness, but of strength, etched proof of all he had endured and overcome. His new vest, folded neatly on a chair, seemed to watch over him like another guardian in the room. Peter sat cross-legged nearby, one hand resting lightly on Parker's side. Anna came in carrying 2 mugs of tea, her hair loose from a long day at the clinic. She smiled when she saw Parker wag his tail at her approach. "He likes the fire," she said, settling onto the couch. "He likes that he's home," Peter replied, his voice soft but sure. They weren't alone anymore. 2 other dogs lay curled in corners of the room, both rescues from Iron Paw's network. One, a Belgian Malinois with a cloudy eye, snored faintly by the door. The other, an older shepherd with a crooked ear, rested under the table, his gaze following every movement with cautious curiosity. Anna looked at them all, her expression thoughtful. "It feels different, doesn't it? The house? Like it's breathing again." Peter nodded. They carry the weight of what they survived. But together, it feels lighter. Parker leads, and the others follow. The fire crackled sparks rising up the chimney. Parker shifted, lifting his head just enough to nuzzle Peter's knee before laying it back down with a sigh. Peter's eyes softened. That scar, people look at it and see pain. I see the night he pulled me through fire, the nights he held on when no one else would. It's not a wound. It's a story. Anna leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. And now it's a beacon. Every time someone sees him, they'll know he's living proof that loyalty can't be erased. The older shepherd under the table stretched, slowly inching closer to the fire. Parker's ears flicked, but instead of tensing, he shifted to make space, his presence calm and inviting. The dog hesitated, then lowered himself beside Parker, pressing against him as if to borrow strength. Peter and Anna exchanged a look, a quiet acknowledgement of the moment. Healing wasn't just Parker's journey anymore. It was spreading to every soul that found their way into this house. Later after dinner, dishes were cleared and the dogs were settled. Peter stood at the window. Snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting under the glow of the street lamp. He felt Anna's presence beside him, her shoulder brushing his lightly. "You've built something here," she said. "A place for them to start again." Peter nodded, his eyes still on the snow. "It's what Parker taught me. We don't survive alone. We survive together." Behind them, the fire glowed steady. Parker's scar catching the light as he dozed peacefully. It no longer told of torment. It told of endurance, loyalty, and the strength to rise again. Morning came soft and pale, the snow still clinging to rooftops in Silverwood. The house on Whitlow Street was quiet, except for the gentle rhythm of breathing from the dogs spread across the living room. Parker stretched beside the hearth, his body stronger now, his coat fuller, his scar shining faintly in the early light. Peter sat at the table with Anna, a folder open between them. A courier had delivered it that morning. Anonymous, unsigned. Inside were maps, notes, and coordinates written in hurried scrawl. Each page pointed to facilities across the state, warehouses and compounds marked with the same initials, IP. Anna traced a finger across one location. "They're still out there," she said. "This isn't the end." Peter leaned back, the weight of the folder pressing into him. Iron Paw thought Parker would disappear, but he survived. Now his story is forcing others to step forward. Whoever sent this wants us to keep going. Anna met his eyes, steady. Will you? Peter glanced toward the fire, where Parker stirred awake. The shepherd rose slowly, padding across the floor with quiet strength. He nudged Peter's leg. Amber eyes clear, no longer clouded by fear. Yes, Peter said softly. We will. The day unfolded quietly. Anna fed the rescues, her hands gentle, her voice calm. Peter repaired a broken section of the back fence, Parker watching him with patient eyes, as if supervising the work. The house felt alive in a way Peter hadn't known in years, every corner carrying purpose. When night returned, stars spread wide across the sky, unbroken by clouds. The fire inside had burned low, its glow softer now. Parker stood by the door, ears twitching toward the quiet outside. Peter opened the door and followed him onto the porch. The air was sharp with winter, the ground crisp under a thin layer of frost. Parker stepped forward, tail raised, chest broad. He paused at the edge of the steps, lifting his head toward the sky. The scar along his flank caught the starlight, glowing like a badge of honor. For a moment, Peter saw him not just as his partner, but as a sentinel, proof that endurance could outlast cruelty. Anna joined them, wrapping her coat tighter around her. He looks different now, she said softly. He is, Peter replied. He's whole again, and he knows he's not alone. Parker turned, bumping Peter's hand with his nose, then looked back at the horizon as if urging them onward. Beyond the town, beyond the quiet hills, lay other dogs, still waiting, still carrying scars. Peter exhaled his breath, fogging in the cold air. This chapter's finished, he said more to himself than anyone. But the journey isn't. Anna nodded her eyes on Parker. Then we walk it together. The three of them stood on the porch, framed by the silver glow of moon and stars. Behind them, the rescued dogs slept safe by the fire. Ahead, the world stretched wide, filled with both shadows and the promise of light. Parker lifted his head higher, steady, unflinching. His silence spoke louder than any vow. The night held them there, man, woman, and dog, bound not by what had been lost, but by what still could be saved. And so, the story did not end. It only turned a page carrying Parker's scar, Peter's resolve, and Anna's care into a new chapter waiting just beyond the horizon. The story of Peter and Parker is more than a tale of survival. It is a reminder of the bond that exists between humans and the animals who stand beside us. Parker's scars tell of cruelty, yet they shine brighter as symbols of loyalty, courage, and resilience. They prove that even when shadows fall, love and trust can bring light back into the darkest places. German shepherds have long been known as protectors, loyal, intelligent, and unwavering. Through Parker, we see not just the image of a working dog, but the heart of a companion who gives everything without asking in return. His journey from abandonment to honor shows us that no life should ever be discarded, and that healing is always possible when compassion leads the way. This story also carries a wider message. It calls us to look closer at how we treat the voiceless, to question systems that exploit, and to act when we see injustice. Parker's survival brought justice for many, but more importantly, it brought hope. That change can begin with one act of care, one choice to stand and protect. For those who love animals, especially dogs, like the German Shepherd Parker's journey is a testament to why they deserve our respect and gratitude. They remind us of loyalty that does not falter, of courage that rises even when broken, and of love that survives beyond scars. Let this story inspire us to live with more kindness, to defend those who cannot speak, and to honor the silent heroes who give their lives for ours. In choosing compassion, we not only change their world, we change our own.